Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Chala, Perek Aleph, Halacha Hey. We're learning today Daf Tez Vav, and we left off on Daf Tez Vav Amud Aleph by the second line from the top, Masif, in our version, Rabbi Yochanan L'Reish Lakish. We're dedicating today's class, L'Refuah Shalema, to Michal ben Nechamadina. Now, before we give the intro, let's quickly go back. I want to close up the top line in the Gemara. We began the sugyan daf Yud Dalid Amid Beis of Hamimoreach Kiryoy Shal Chaveroi Shaloi Midatoi. So a Gemar Malacha was affected on someone's pile of grain, but the owner did not know about it. He did not ask for it. It's done completely without his awareness. Someone else did it for him. Question is, does the act without any involvement and awareness from the owner, will it affect a Gemar Malacha? Meaning, will the pile become tevel to the point that midrabanan you may not even snack from it? Machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan says all we look at is the act. We look at the external. Yes, you have a meruach nitbal, and Reish Lakish holds since it was done without the awareness of the owner, shaloi medatoi loy nitbal. So yesterday we had two challenges that were posed against Rabbi Yochanan. Second one was from a Mishnah in Maisris, where you had the anthole, and the Mishnah differentiates whether the anthole in which you found kernels, was it near a pile that already underwent meruach? There, those kernels may not be eaten, even though there was farther away another pile or more of grain that did not yet have its Gemar Malacha, and vice versa. If it's near the one that did not have its Gemar Malacha, then you are allowed to eat it. And there was one nekuda that the Gemara made here on top of the Amid, is that the Mishnah is speaking about a scenario that the kernels that you found in it still had some of their husks on them, which means, aside of the fact that a human did not do its Gemar Malacha, there was no awareness, ants did it. On top of that, there wasn't actually Gemar Malacha because it's unprocessed, because some of these kernels still have their husks on it. Problem is that if that's the case of the Mishnah, just to speak it out, then why is it that if the anthole was near the pile that underwent its Gemar Malacha, why is it that we say that those kernels that you find in the anthole may not be eaten? Why may they not be eaten? The very fact that they have their husks on it should indicate that the ants took it from the farther pile. So the pshat must be, and this is important for today's daf, that what we say is that the chazaka of Karev, we say that the ants took it from the nearby pile, from the close pile. And the close pile had almost all of their kernels properly cleansed from its husks. And there was a meruach. Happens to be that in this pile, there were a couple of kernels that still had their husk. And they were mixed in the majority that were completely processed. And the halacha there will be that even the kernels that are still in the Rashi Shibalim, they will have the status of tevel, because we do apply Gemar Malacha to them, because they are nullified to the majority of the pile. And the ants, because of this chazaka that they took it from the nearby pile. Fact that they have Rashi Shibalim doesn't mean anything. It means that they are still nitbal, because they underwent meruach. And that's going to be important again to something that will be a bit different in today's daf. So continuing with this sugya of the machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, yesterday's daf had two challenges against Rabbi Yochanan. Now the sugya will begin with making challenges against Reish Lakish. Once we conclude the sugya and no one will be refuted, the machlokes will stand. The Gemara today is going to go back to the Mishnah, to Halacha Hey, and we're going to have many discussions based on implied laws of the Mishnah. For example, the Mishnah rules that when women give the baker portions of their flour for the baker to turn it all into a sourdough, the Mishnah says if none of the women's portion have the shear, then even though when the baker needed it, it was the shear, since he's going to for sure divide it while they are still in dough, it's pater. So the Gemara infers from the Mishnah, when do we say it's pater if not a single woman's flour amounted to the shear, implying that even if only one of the many women's flour did have the shear, it's going to be machayev all of the women's dough to challah. And that's something that we're going to delve into. And indeed, that inference will stand. Another din that will come out from our Mishnah, and something that we already learned in Masechtas Maasros, that produce that is completely processed, but yet one is planning to at some point mix it back into unprocessed product. We had that concerning wine removed from the gas in a pitcher with one's intent of whatever will not be used will be poured back. We consider the wine even in the flask as unprocessed because of the person's plan to put it back into unprocessed produce. Another big sugya of today, and that will be regarding the Isa Saklovim. And that's going to be something that we're going to have three different ways of understanding the mitzias of a dough that's primarily made for dogs to eat. Now, the Mishnah says, it depends. If the shepherds eat from it, bizman shaharoyim oichlin mimeno, then you have to take off challah. And the Mishnah gave a series of halachas that are contingent on a dough / bread being considered lechem. Now, what's the pshat that shepherds will eat, shepherds will not eat? Is it something about the chefza of the dough? Is it something about the people's custom? Is it the gavra? Is it the chefza? We're going to have, again, three ways. It's gavra or chefza, but in the gavra proper, there'll be two ways of understanding it. And from there, we're going to go on to some hilchas yamtiv. The Mishnah says that when you have isa saklavim, again, bisman sheharoim, oichlin mimenu, you could make it on Yantif. And the Gemara again understands that the Mishnah is implying, even if the shepherds won't eat all of the dough, all of the bread that you're making on Yantif, nevertheless, more than what the shepherds will eat, you may make. And that's the sugya of riboy b'shiyurim. We're going to have a good chazara. Like on Yantif, I'm allowed to make food for Yantif, for a Yid, lochem. Okay, so if I plan to eat one piece of meat and I'm putting up a pot, am I allowed to put 2 pieces of meat, 3 pieces of meat in the pot? When I only plan to eat one, and the others will be eaten after Yom Tov in the week, and Yom Tov cannot prepare for the week. That's called ribi b'shiyurim. Or do we say, since I'm allowed to already cook, bake on Yom Tov, so once you're doing it, you can add as much as you want. So we're going to have nuance. Where there is tircha, where there is no tircha, we're going to have actually a machloikas tanoim regarding baking. All of that will play its way into our sugya. And finally, when the Mishnah teaches that isa saklavim, when shepherds do not eat from it, if one will, you don't even make the bracha of hamoitzi. And this is a big exception by birchas hanehenen that you're eating something and you don't have to make a bracha. So the Gemara is going to give us another scenario where you can eat something and you won't make a bracha. And that's going to be the sugya known in the Bavli as mitzvah haba'a ba'aveda. We're going to be speaking about someone who stole matzah and how that person is not to make, not the bracha hamoitzi lechem in haaretz, not the bracha alachilas matzah. We're going to have a question whether you'll fulfill the obligation of the mitzvah of matzah. And what's amazing is that we have words in the Yerushalmi that we don't have in the Bavli. In the Bavli, this sugya is coined as mitzvah haba'a ba'aveda. We are familiar with this, right? Sukkah. Right, Pei Gimel. Here, the words will be either ein avera mitzvah or ein mitzvah avera. We'll see exactly the difference between these two versions that have in them the content of that know that if you sinned, in this case, you stole the matzah, haboitzeya beirech ni'etz Hashem, a bracha will not be made. We'll leave it at that. A lot more when we learn inside. Chevra Daf Tezvav, Amud Aleph. Again, second line from the top of the Amud. Someone smoothed his fellow's pile of grain, doing the Gemar Melacha in the Oila Masiyah, but without the awareness of its owner, Shaloi Medatoi. Rabbi Yechanan Nitbal, Reish Lakish Loi Nitbal. So our version will be Masav Rabbi Yechanan Lit Rab Shimon ben Lakish. Now we're going to go in the opposite direction. We're going to challenge the Shita of Rab Shimon ben Lakish that says that loy nitbal. Why? Because there wasn't consent, awareness from its owner. For hataninon, challenge will come from a Mishnah in Peah. The Mishnah over there is telling us the general rule that if produce underwent its gemar melacha while belonging to hekdesh, that will always be exempt from trumas u'maisres, even if afterwards it was redeemed. Higdishon. There we're speaking about someone who had a pile of grain, and the owner consecrated it prior to its meruach. Who made the meruach? Ugemara and Hagizbar. The temple treasurer, the Gabbai of the Beis Hamikdash, made the meruach, and then it was redeemed. In other words, of course, while it belongs to Hegdish, no one will separate Trumas and Maasros. The Chiddush here will be is that now it became common property of a Hedyot. Nevertheless, the Mishnah Paskins, that's the rule Pturin. They will always remain exempt. Why? Because since the critical moment is it's Gemar Melacha, during the Gemar Melacha, it was belonging to Hegdish, it's exempt. Problem is, who made the Meruach? God did not make the Meruach. The temple treasurer, the Gabbai, made the Meruach. The presumption, the basis of this question is that the treasurer or the Gabbai, he's not the balabas, even though he did it with his own intent, but the real owner was not involved in it. Harei gizbar ka'acharu. And yet, says Rabbi Yechanan, va'at amrat, but the Mishnah says, masha asui is asui. We do take this meruach into account. In other words, hamemorech kirya shal chaveri shaloi midato, yes, nitbal. Question against Reish Lakish. And this really has to do with how we view a Gabbai. What is the balabatashkeit of the temple's Gabbai over the belongings that were consecrated to the Beis Hamikdash? And that's a machlikas tanoim. So Amalei. So Reish Lakish responds, tiftoid. Let's interpret, let's understand that this Mishnah follows Kemando Amar Gizbar is the owner. So yeah, if the Gizbar did the Meruach, the Gizbar is, so to say, the owner of that which belongs to Hegdish. And indeed, it won't follow with all opinions, Udoloi Rabbi Yosi, because the Rabbi Yosi Amar, Hu Gizbar Hu Acher. I think Rabbi Yosi did not like the Gabbai in the shul. Like, how much Balabatashkeit does the Gabbai have? Maybe that, make it very practical. Danny was not the Gabbai in Rabbi Yosi shul, so he considered him a Acher. Okay, weiter. Now that Reish Lakish was not refuted, we're going back again to the Mishnah. The Mishnah rules in the second case of the Mishnah that when women who owned flour gave their flour to a baker, not as a gift, but they're asking for the baker to perform a service with their flour, which is to turn their flour into sourdough. And what the baker did, no problem with that, is that instead of him making each one's flour into sourdough on their own, he mixed all the flours together, now having a shear, making it into sourdough, obviously with the kavana of breaking it back up as dough, not as bread, and giving back each shtickle dough to its owner. So the Mishnah says that if none of the women's portions have the shear of challah, it's exempt, even though at the critical moment of the kneading, it does have the shear because it's combined with others. Now, the Gemara implies from the Mishnah that when does the Mishnah say that the challah, that the dough is exempt, if none of their portions of flour amount to the shear, implying that if even only one woman's flour amounts to the shear, not the others. Say there are 10 women here. 9 of them gave less than the 5 pounds. But if one of them gave the baker the 5 pounds of flour, then listen to this. Then when the baker is kneading the sourdough all together, challah has to be removed from all of it. In other words, the shear of 1 of 24 is not 1/24 of that woman's dough, of all of the dough. Now that's something that has to be understood. Why would one woman's shear trigger a chiyuv for the other woman's flour that don't have the shear that's chayiv and challah?
Isn't the baker taking possession of them all?
One more time.
Didn't the baker take possession of all of them?
Yeah, but still, you can argue, since he plans to break it up, okay, he's chayiv to take, let him only take a 24th and deduct it from that woman's flour when he gives back her sourdough. Okay, so says the Gemara, Rabbi Hananya. Just to know, Rabbi Hananya is Rabbi Bar Nachmani. Rabbi Bar Nachmani is brought down on the first Perek of Tanya, right? He's the Kegoin Ano Benani. So he had a brother, Rabbi Hananya, and he's referred to as Rabbi Hananya Chavroin de Rabbanan, the Chaver of the Rabbanan. We call him the Chaver of the Rabbanan, according to some, because Rabbi Hananya did not get smicha. So we call them the friends of the Rabbanan. Interestingly, if that is accurate, then you would argue he should not be called Rebbe. That would mean that the title Rebbe is given even when one does not have smicha. But anyways, Rabbi Chananya, which one? The Chavran de Rabbanan boy asked the following question. Like we explained from the implication. Does the Mishnah not imply that vafilu yesh b'shal achas mehem kishiur, that even if the flour of one of the many women, as a mushal, there were 10 women, one of them had the shear, then the baker has to remove challah from the entirety of the sourdough. All of it will be required to have challah removed from it. But why? So what? We should still treat the entire dough as a davar shaloi nigmar malachtoi vis-a-vis trumas u'maisres. Just like the critical moment that's machayev trumas u'maisres is the gemar malacha. Well, if only a little bit has gemar malacha, but the majority does not have gemar malacha, then all of it does not have gemar malacha. Same thing should be over here. The machayev of challah, it's not gemar malacha, is needing it with the shear. Well, most of the women's, it's not 2 women, it's many. There's only one. She's a minority. So says the Gemara. In other words, that's his question. Now, where does Rabbi Hananya get his premise that if I have produce, some of which underwent Gemar Malacha, but it's mixed with majority that's not yet Gemar Malachat, none of it is Chayiv and Trumas U'Maisris? Where does he get that from? The Amar Rabbi Yossi b'Shem Rab Ze'era. And Rabbi Yoina doesn't quote it b'Shem Rab Ze'era, but Rabbi Yoina heard it directly from Rab Ze'era. And Rab Ze'era heard it b'Shem Rab Elazar. And this is going back to a sugya that we had in Masechtas Maisres in our pagination, Daf Lamed Dalid, where we were speaking about the Gemar Malacha of wine. It's only after you skimmed the shemarim off it. But on the other hand, if you went into the vat and you put it into a flask, that means you removed wine in a serving pitcher, even though it did not yet undergo the final stage. For you, there's Gemar Malacha. You would think that from that flask, you have to now be Toidem U'Ma'asir. Yet the rule is that you don't have to. The question is, why not? And the answer there that was given is that since the person who removes wine from the vat in the wine press without it being fully finished is only doing so because they need emergency wine, but they themselves plan that whatever will be left over will be poured back. And since their intention is to pour back whatever remains in the flask, we consider all of the flask as something shaloi nigmar malachtoi, af masha belogin, even that which is in the flask doesn't yet have the status of tevel because you're planning to put it back. So here, that's the kasha, that's the premise of our kasha of Rabbi Hananya. What do we see from over here? That even if this little amount of wine has gemar malacha because you put it into a flask, since you plan to put it back in into the vat that's not yet skimmed, we view it as a davar shaloi nigmar malachtoi. Why, asks Rabbi Hananya, should be not the same over here, which would be that even that woman's amount of flour, that's 5 pounds, even her flour should not be chayiv in afrashas challah. Why not? Because the baker put it into many other women's flour. So there is a majority of flours that are not chayiv in challah. You're planning to put it in there. You put it in there. So it should become bottled in the context of there is no more mechayiv. And all of it should be exempt. And that's the kasha. And once we explain the premise of the kasha, kimina ga Yerushalmi, we don't even attempt to answer it. Good kasha.
So to understand the kasha, the question is, you take the 5 pounds and you split it between the chveis 30, 40.
You mix it.
You mix it, but you split it up into different ones, no?
No, you're not splitting anything up. The whole vart is that the baker has everything in one dough. But the Mishnah is giving you the rule that since the baker is planning to divide the dough prior to putting it into the oven, we already look at it as divided.
Okay. So, it's the next step, but conceptually the same, that it's being split, which is why it could be butter.
Correct.
Okay.
I just want to point something out that Vlad mentioned off camera a while back when we were learning about the 5 grains and you mix them together. And we had also a machloikas, whether there's bittul or not bittul, beroiv. There were two roivs that really have to be, that one should really learn this deeper, more thoroughly. We did not learn it thoroughly enough. We're learning nothing thoroughly enough. And that is that there is a roiv because you have 5 grains. So one of the 5 is a minority of the other 4. That's one type of bittul beroiv. And the other type of bittul beroiv is the quantity, And the same thing has to be looked into over here, Vlad. In other words, when he's asking that it should be batal, why is it batal? Like I wonder, I'm using, Vlad, your point in our case. What happens if one woman has 5 pounds? Let's say there's a total of 3 women. So 2 of them don't have the shear. But let me add to that. The 2 women's together is less than 5 pounds. So here you can argue both ways. You can argue, well, it's roiv. Why? 1 woman, bottle and 2 women, or look at the quantity of the flour. That's and they may, and by the way, that might be the way out of this question. Maybe when do we say in Meiser is that the wine is already loy nitbal, is because you're putting the wine in the pitcher back into the vat. The vat has more quantity than the wine in the pitcher. Maybe the implied law of our Mishnah is where this woman's 5 pounds of flour is more than the other 2 women's. She has 5. There are 2 other women. Each one of these women only have 2 pounds. Together they have 4. Maybe that's the implied rule. Even though there's a roiv of other women, but there's a roiv of flour that's chayv. Could be. Anyways, let's go weiter. So moving on to the new topic, we have a new member here. So let me just give you a quick background. That the Mishnah is speaking about isas haklovim. Isas haklovim, dough that is made into bread, designated for dogs. So there are many halachas that are contingent on how do we view that bread? Do we view that bread as animal food? If it's animal food, you're not chayiv to separate challah. Let's just focus on that. If it's considered human food, you're chayiv to separate challah from the dough. So the Mishnah says it depends. If it's an isas haklavin bisman shahoroyim oichlin mimenu, if the shepherds will eat from it, then it has a din of lechem. If the shepherds don't eat from it, it doesn't have a din of lechem. Now, what the Gemara wants to understand is, what does it mean shepherds eat, shepherds don't eat? Is it that we're speaking about the same dough, the chefza is the same, but some people are finicky, or maybe in the other direction. Here in LA, people have such love to their animals that they eat their animal food. Or is it pshat that there is different types of doughs? There is a type of dough that's taka made for animals, but it's closer to human food. That's the Gemara's question. Really, it's gabra or chefza, but the Gemara is actually going to break it down in 3 approaches. But one, it's coming from either the gabra or the chefza. Let's read it and say isak lavim. So eizu isak lavim. So Reish Lakish says, and I'm using the words chefza, that kol she'erav bam mursan. We are in daf tezva of Amud Aleph. We're still in Amud Aleph. Okay, we have to really run. That kol she'erav bam mursan. Mursan, guys, means bran, coarse bran. Just for the record, even bread that's made for humans to eat, even prior to today's crazy world, that we are all eating Michael Behema, when people still ate Michael Adam, flour has some bran in it. In the Beis Hamikdash, why did they sift it 13 times? Because when you sift it once, there's still some there's still klipa. Okay, so just for the record, guys, halt cup. When you need to have, we're learning the minimum share to separate challah, 43.2 eggs, 5 pounds of flour. Do we include in that the mursan? The answer is absolutely yes. In other words, when you go to the market today and you're buying flour, first of all, today with machinery, I think things are more refined. The problem today is that they took all the nutrients out of the food, they added so many poisons, that's another issue. But vis-a-vis the separating of the klipa, the separating of the bland, I think it's done gewaldig today. Be that as it may, whatever is accepted, whatever grade A, if grade A in America accepts, let's say, 1% of bran, 2% of coarse bran, if I have exactly 5 pounds, I don't say, I don't have 5 pounds, because be'emes, I have 5 pounds minus 1% of bran. We don't deduct the bran from the share. That's very important. The bran that is used to be mixed in, that's acceptable, becomes part of the share. but there is a quantity of bran that we accept when flour is being made into dough bread for people. And then when it's fed to animals, when you feed it to animals, you allow for more bran to be left in there. So the Pshat says that a shlakish of Isas HaKlavim is a type of dough in which there is a substantial amount of coarse bran in it. Now, I want to say the following. And now, let's go further. So what will it mean, Isas HaKlavim, that the shepherds don't eat? That's a dough that has even more that bran. In other words, the difference between shepherds do eat or shepherds don't eat it, it's not because these shepherds were hungrier than the others. No, it's because it's a siman that it's a different quality bread. The lower the quality, the less human food. Okay. And Ashlakish proves himself from the Mishnah. Masnisa Amra. Fact that the Mishnah uses the words Bisman sheharoin oichlim mimenu, which means pa'amim she'ein haroim oichlim mimenu. It means he reads the Mishnah two varieties. Not the same type, depends b'minag hamakim. It's two different varieties. The chefza is different. Rabbi Yechanan disagrees with that. Rabbi Yechanan says that our Mishnah is speaking about the same type of dough, which is designated for dogs. Rabbi Yechanan Amar, and he says the following. It's amazing. When a person designates dough to be turned into animal food, they normally don't make the effort of making the loaves pretty, which would be rounded. When they make it for dogs, they don't care about the shape because dogs are eating it. So the Gemara calls it looks like a board. In other words, the dough is the zelda. The packaging is different. Why would you have to package it? Had they only lived today in LA, today they would make it even prettier. But then, no, for people it was packaged, and for animals, they don't need it, so the packaging. So that's a big nafkamin. In other words, it's the same chefza, it just looks different. Rabbi Yechanan Amar, kol shasan ke'oven means loaves. That's when the royin eat from it. Bisman she'ein haroyin oichlim mimenu is when they're made like boards, even though the dough is the same. And indeed, Rabbi Yechanan says v'tanikein, and I'll back myself up from a brayso, not like Reish Lakish. Says in the brayso befedish, if this isas hakalavim asan ke'oven, if they were made like loaves, rounded, they looked like breads made for man, then it's subject to challah, etc., etc. Asa limudin. It's amazing. Limudin. I don't know how you get there. Limudin means a board. That's because, I don't know, the teachers would hit the students with boards. I don't know how the word limudim comes to that, but okay, beautiful.
I remember that.
I remember. Yeah, I got the ruler. I got much worse than the ruler. May Hashem have mercy on my teacher. He used the belt with the metal.
Rabbi, if a loaf was not made pretty and it was made for humans, does that not require to be taken off?
Very good. So all this nuance, again, we're learning not so thorough. We're learning as a Daf Yomi style. It sounds from the way we're learning that intent is everything. Very good, Kevan.
Right.
And therefore, if that was the intention to make yourself exempt from challah, you can't do that. Now, Daf Tezvav Amid Beis, Rabbi Ba, for the newcomer, Rabbi Abba, in the Yerushalmi, they skipped the first aleph. Ba or Va, Vav aleph is Rabbi Abba. No, there were many Rabbi Abbas. So Rabbi Ba, B'Shem Shmuel, and Rav Ami, B'Shem Rabbi Chia Ruba, Rabbi Chia Ruba was Rav's uncle. From the father, from the mother, Psachim Davdalet. So we call him Rabbi Chia Ruba. That afilu asa kiluskin, that even if, Kevan, even if you have the finest flour, he's going even more. You have flour that people would not give to animals. If you decide that you're going to give your finest flour to your dog, not that there's bran, not that it's shaped like a board, it's mamish, it's the best type of bread. If you intend to give it to klavim, meaning it's made exclusively, not also for,
Right.
that is called isas haklavim.
Got it.
Clear. And by the way, that's only b'shem Shmuel. That means that the other Amoraim did not hold that way. They felt that at some point, if the quality is human food, just because you intend to give it to your dog, what you're going to exempt it from chiyuv challah. That's a very important machlokes. How much of your kavana can qualify something, even when it objectively is mamish the best bread. And bread is staple food. Okay, Gavaldik. Says the Gemara against this third opinion, im ein haroyin oichlin mimenu. All right, which again, we understand it that shepherds won't eat. Why would they not eat? Why would a shepherd not eat from a piece of bread that is fine flour, that looks like a loaf? Why would they not eat? So Tiftar, the Gemara says, it's not that the shepherds choose not to eat it. No, it was not made for them. In other words, it was made for dog food, which means the owner won't let the shepherds eat from it, not because it's unedible. This is Gavaldik. Now, there's dark humor. A bubby is making cookies in the house, and the Eineklach want to eat it, but Zayd was sick. She says, no, this is for the Shiva. It's not made for now. It's made for later. A lot is laughing. It's a bad joke. Okay, let's go back.
No, but if the shepherds do eat from it, do they make hamotzi?
That's the whole point. Yes, they do.
They do make hamotzi.
Yes,
okay.
They do make hamotzi.
Got it.
And they do make a zimun. And
Right.
You can make it on Yom Tov. No, but the Mishnah gave a series of laws. So one law is Venasas B'Yom Tov, that if it's a type of bread, even though it's Isas HaKlavim, if the shepherds will eat from it, you can make it on Yom Tov. Now again, we quoted the pasuk that hu levada yeyase lochem, ach asher yeyochel lochol nefesh hu levada yeyase lochem, says the pasuk that oichel nefesh is excluded from the laws of melacha, but b'med dvaram amurim that you're making food for Yom Tov. I'm not allowed to make food for the weekday on Yom Tov. The question is, what's going to happen if I'm making food for Yom Tov, but I know that there's going to be leftovers for the week? I'll tell you better. I have a pot. I'm going to eat one roast, one shtickle fleish. The pot is up. Am I allowed to put 2 pieces of meat in the pot on Yom Tov? So says the Gemara, Venasas B'Yom Tov. So the Gemara understands that the Mishnah implies that as long as shepherds eat human food, it's human bread, you can make as much as you want. So this says the Gemara, that can only follow Rab Shimon ben Elazar. The Tani we learned in a Braisa, okay, that's a Mishnah. You can't make food on Yom Tov for after Yom Tov. But V'hatani here means, but yet the Braisa teaches that memala isha kedera basar. A woman could fill up her pot with meat on Yom Tov, even though she knows she's only eating 1 piece of meat. Now, the reason for that, why is that? There are 2 reasons for that. Number one says the Marafulda, because it's called melacha achas. Number 2, because putting a piece of meat in a pot is not called something that demands tircha. So there is no tircha. It's not a nothing. You're putting a piece of meat in the pot, but putting a piece of meat in the pot is nothing. So it's one melacha, 1 pot is cooking. She didn't put up another pot. It's 1 pot. She's adding meat, which is not defined as something that demands excessive work. So there's no problem. Similarly, kumkum chamen. I think we all do this. On Yom Tov, I fill up my hot water. But I don't have to cheshbon, how many cups of coffee am I going to have? I'm only going to have 2 cups. Put in 2 cups. No, you can fill it up. This is according to everyone. Even though you know you're only going to be drinking 1 cup on Yom Tov, you can fill it up even if it's 150 cups. Why? It's 1 pot, 1 melacha. I know you can argue. It's not called tircha. Where do we have a machloikes? Tanoim. Bread. Bread is different. It's taka 1 oven, but the way they would put bread in the oven, ridias hapas, is taka chachma ve'ena malacha. But you got to know what you're doing, because you would have to stick it on the walls, the inner walls of the oven, and it takes a certain amount of tircha, not tircha yeseder. So here we have a machlokes. So it says the Braisa, avol la'afois. When it comes to baking in an oven, no, ein oife elatzarcha. And again, it's understood from our Mishnah that once you are making isas haklavim, you can make many loaves, even though the royin shepherds will only eat 1. That can't follow the Tanakama. Who argues with the Tanakama? Rab Shimon ben Elazar Oimer. Yes, memalahi isha esatanur pas. She could fill up the whole oven with bread, and it is considered tircha. Why is she allowed to do it? He has a gavaldik logic, because the taste of the bread that's baked in an oven that's filled with other breads is better than a piece of bread that's being baked alone. So, and the chanami, you're making an extra tircha, but it's litzoydech yontif. Mipnei shehapas yafa b'shah shatan normally. It's like chavra learning together. The oilam is sleeping today. It's their loss, but it's our loss. Why? Because that's how it works. When more people learn together, when the tanur is filled, everyone learns better. Pilpul chavedim, there's nothing like it. Okay, and the final topic for today, which is huge, and again, we're learning something that's worded in the Yerushalmi very different the way it's worded in the Bavli, and there has to be a reason for that. So our Mishnah, amongst the many dinim, said that when you have dough that's designated for dogs, isa saklav, bisman she'ein haroyin oichle mimenu, when shepherds will not eat from it, which means it's not classified as food. So the Mishnah says ve'ein mevarchen oleh, which means that if someone chooses to eat from it, batla datoi, you're not eating. That means today the people here that have dogs, obviously, if their dog has a hechsher on it, because the dog food can be treif. But if let's assume that it's kosher, which we're not allowed to, but in the case where it's kosher, what happens if someone decides to eat from it? You don't make a bracha. You don't make a bracha for it. So, and it's very rare to find halachic scenarios where a person eats something and they benefit from it and they get nutrients from it and they don't make a bracha. Very rare. I'm saying get nutrients because, it's easier when a person is drinking water, not that they're thirsty. L'mashal, they have to swallow a pill and they need water. There, the halacha is they don't make a shahakal, but not only is it because they're not drinking it for the thirst, but because they're not being nizoin. They're not getting nutrition from the water. They're getting they're getting moisture from the water, which is very important, but they're not getting nutrition. Here, they're eating something with nutritional value. It's very so. The Gemara says there is one other case where you eat something and you don't make a bracha. And what would that be? Tanei matzah gezula. This gewaldige sugya. Matzah gezula means let's go. A person stole a matzah prior to Pesach to fulfill the mitzvah of eating. So says the Braisa, asur levarech oleh. Now, Chevre, there's so much argument on how to understand all of this. We're gonna go beginning with the Mara Fulda. Asur levarech oleh means not hamoitzi. Not hamoitzi. L'chu'ura would then also mean any stolen food, not only matzah, but also not alachilas matzah. Don't we make two brachas? But there's a machlokes, if we learn Rambam, between the Rambam and the Ravid, right? When it comes to non-kosher food, general, non-kosher food, the Rambam says you don't make birchas hanehenen. The Rambam says so. Quoting the same pasuk in Tehillim, that habitzeya beirech, the one who breaks bread, we're speaking about bread that is not kosher, you're blessing God. Ni'etz Hashem, you're blaspheming God, God forbid. The Ravid says, remember, the Ravid says on the Rambam, you're wrong. When food is not kosher, you don't make a zimun, because you can't call this a kvius. You're going against the will of God. Anything against the will of God won't stand. It's not kovua. But the bracha you're making, that's a big machlokes. We're going like with Shita Saramba.
Well, if you steal a tefillin, you can make a bracha on it, can't you?
Very good. That's a very good. No, you can't. According to this, you can't. Kavan, if I don't steal, if I go into shul, like today, the oilam is sleeping, and I borrow someone's tefillin, which I think Yosef will do if you don't have your tefillin, no one is here.
Well, standing out there, would agree.
No, they remember that we learned that in Psachim, that there's a chazaka that a person wants.
Would want you to do it, right?
A person wants for others to use their stuff for a mitzvah if they put it back properly.
Right.
As long as it doesn't ruin it, correct. But that's different. But if someone steals, yeah. So again, let's go with the pshat, not hamoitzi, which is not about a mitzvah, nor achilas matzah. Omar Rabbi Hoishaya al Shem Tehillim v'habitzeya beirech. That habitzeya here will not the one who breaks bread. Here was habitzeya means a ganef, a thief who says a bracha. Who you think you're blessing God? Ni'etz Hashem, you're blaspheming Hashem. Now hadad tema b'tchila. Rabbi Shaya, who brought a source for the Braisa, now will qualify the din of the Braisa. When do we say, this is very important, that a bracha is not made only betchila? B'tchila would mean not hamoitzi, not achilas matzon. Aval b'soif. What about birchas hamazon? Look at the nuance. Do you bench? Yeah, bench. You have to bench. Why? Because when you when you steal something, it becomes yours when you completely transform it. You change it. When you put it in your mouth and you make a bracha before you eat it. But once you ate it, now it's yours. Now that it's yours, you owe money, but you don't give back the thing you ate. Since you're chayiv money, not the item, now you have to bench. Why? Because damimu chayiv loy. Yes, bench. That is Rab Hoshaya. Rabbi Yoina argues, you don't bench. Now look at, there's two nuance. The words that Rabbi Yoina says, Ein Aveira Mitzvah. In other words, benching is a mitzvah. But how did you get to the mitzvah? As a result of the fact that you stole the matzah. From an Aveira, you can't come to a mitzvah. So, now, Rabbi Shaya, I want to add something. Even though Rabbi Shaya and Rabbi Yoina are arguing about benching, I want to know whether you fulfilled the mitzvah. So the Marafulda says that when Rabbi Yoina says Ein Aveira mitzvah, he's saying two things. You don't bench. He's saying you did not fulfill the mitzvah, which implies that Rabbi Hoshaya, who says you do bench, listen to these words, he holds you did fulfill the mitzvah. Why did you fulfill the mitzvah? Same thing. Birchas hanehen you make before you eat it. Before you eat it, you're ganef, but you owe the item. The item is not yours. How can you make a bracha? When you eat it, now that you ate it, you swallowed the kazayas, you changed it. When did you do the gezela? Before. It's not the basachas.
You don't owe matzah.
Huh?
I mean, you don't owe matzah anymore, so now you don't owe matzah. It's money.
Okay, yeah, I like the way you're wording it. Even if you owe the matzah.
I mean, but halachically, if I stole matzah and I ate it,
now you owe the money. Because that's true. You don't owe the matzah. You owe the money. So now it's amazing. So we have a machlokes whether you fulfill the mitzvah or not. Rabbi Yosi, who agrees with Rabbi Yoina, changes the words. He doesn't say Ein Aveira mitzvah. This is very deep. He says Ein mitzvah Aveira. He says the same thing in the opposite way. That a mitzvah cannot come through an Aveira. Now, what does that mean? So, Ein mitzvah Aveira v'yidei chiyuv matzah, yes, yotza. The Marafulda understands that when Rabbi Yosi says Ein mitzvah Aveira, he's saying you don't bench. He argues with Rabbi Yishaya. If not, there's no argument. But when he changes the words from Ein Aveira mitzvah to Ein mitzvah Aveira, he argues with Rabbi Yoina and he holds that you did fulfill the mitzvah.
From an Avera.
From an Aveira. You don't bench. You don't make a bracha before. You don't make a bracha afterwards. But the mitzvah you fulfilled.
Just like a thief who donates to let's say, a shul.
You're talking to a rabbi that's fundraising. If you're going to limit me with the thieves, then I'm completely doomed. I don't want to make any link with that. All right. Let's. Yes.
This is so he got schar for mitzvah, but he performs the mitzvah. There's no bracha on either end.
Amazing.
How does that work?
Vlad, I'm happy someone is bothered by this. It's terrible. You're telling me, I think we should not be able to eat breakfast today. Yeah. And it's horrible. I mean, you have a person, the mitzvah he fulfilled, ganef, even a bracha achroni he doesn't make. He's called a blasphemer, but the mitzvah he fulfilled. How can it be? How could it be? Vlad, it's outrageous.
We're separating it all.
They're doing it to instigate us. We should be instigated. And Amar Abhila, that when it says at the end of Bechukoi, say, Eila ha-mitzvahs. These are the mitzvahs. You know what that teaches you? That that only when a mitzvah is done properly, then it's a mitzvah. This is, Vlad, to your point. Not to the way the Mara learns Rabbi Yosef. This is like Rabbi Yoina. But the imlav, but if you did not perform the mitzvah properly, which means you did the mitzvah properly, but you stole. So it's coming from a sin. God says that's not a mitzvah. You did not fulfill the mitzvah. So according to this understanding, look inside the last Marafulda, that Eila ha-mitzvahs uke Rabbi Yoina. No, it's the outrageous is Rabbi Yossi. Not a bracha before, not a bracha afterwards.
Exactly. Rabbi Yossi is truly outrageous. Like,
I would say like this. So just to say like this, what's coming to me, since we're Lubavitcher Hasidim, that this Rabbi Yossi is not speaking about pre-facto. Rabbi Yossi is being malamed chusan yidin, because the danger, that's what you guys said about stolen money, because if we're going to become a purist, which we should strive to be, one can argue that none of us are fulfilling mitzvahs. How horrible would that be?
Right. There's some shul who don't
Post facto, at least the mitzvah. In other words, we're not justifying the theft. But a mitzvah was done. Yossi means he's adding mitzvahs. He's adding mitzvahs with that. If you don't agree with Rabbi Yossi, there's barely any mitzvahs.
You say it's not hazan, meaning benching is not being hazan. Hashem saying, I'm not giving you, food from that. That's you can't do a bracha or bracha.
But the mitzvah, yeah?
Mitzvah, no, meaning you theoretically also give you a mitzvah keeping your dinner this way. But since the way you're eating, say I'm getting source from
struggle with this, guys. Let's suffer.
Question.
That should be the suffering of today, and everyone should pay the bills. Everything else should be good. Everyone should be healthy. Guys, we have to balance life.
If someone goes to a shul and somebody asks you if you're Shomer Shabbat before an aliyah, is that permitted?
That's up to the minig of the shul. Halachically, there's no such restriction. But if a shul has such a minig, then they have the right. The shul has the right to make that if they feel that it's going to encourage people to move forward or whatever.
Sorry, thanks so much.
Well, one last thing. Rabbi Yossi is the minority opinion here, right?
For sure.
Okay.